You like the quick change we do on stage? It's a quick set change. Well, good morning and welcome once again, all of you, to Carolina Family Church. And we're glad that you're here. And can you do me a favor? Back in the booth, can we get some house light? That would be awesome.
Normally I do that.
Oh, yeah, normally that's what Thomas does. So there you go. We got it. All right. I just want to make sure, so this is Thomas and Renae, Jakubisin, okay, and they're going to be sharing with us today. They're not normally to sit in front of people and talk kind of people, and so I wanted to make sure they weren't just like talking into the black abyss out there, which is what it is when there's no lights on. But anyway, so I just want to first of all say welcome. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time especially, I want to say welcome and make yourself at home here. We're doing something through this summer called Summer Stories, and the idea is each week in the series we're going to have someone or a couple from our church to sit down on the couch and not get counseling in front of all of you, although that would be pretty interesting, but rather to share a little bit of their story, what God has brought them through, what God has taught them. And that allows you, first of all, to get to know some people in our church, which is good and something we want to be doing actively. But it also lets some different perspectives and experiences come up here and share and encourage and challenge. And so that's what we've been doing through the summer, and it's just kind of a low-key thing that we've been doing. But it's been really good, and we've heard some really interesting stories in our church. And so... And we've also had a lot of microphone issues. So we've been working on different configurations, and we feel like we've landed on one this week that's going to work. But we thought that every week, and so there's no guarantee that it will. So
yeah, but that one's not me. I'm the light.
Right, you're lights. You're not audio. That's never been Thomas's thing. So, so anyway, so to formally introduce you, in case you haven't met them, this is Thomas and Renae Jakubisin, and they've been a part of our church since nearly the beginning.
Since the beginning, yeah.
Since the beginning, and you guys came because you
found the flyer.
We were the flyer.
Got the
people.
mailer,
yeah.
Got the. We were talking about that during our host comments. But yeah, you got the mailer in your mailbox and decided to come check it out. So that's cool. So they're going to share a little bit about their story with you. And I guess I hadn't introduced myself. If you're new, my name is John, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. So if you can just start off and just give us a little bit of background on your story, where you grew up, your spiritual background, all that. And I think Thomas is going to go first because Renae she's worried that she's going to say something weird or awkward.
I mean, I probably will.
She has a history of that. So yeah, there are some stories there.
Either do no talking or too much talking.
Yeah.
No in between.
So anyway, yeah, Thomas, why don't you get us going?
Yeah, so I'm Thomas. I'm the relatively tall guy in the church. You probably see me in the back here and there. So I grew up in a Christian household. My parents were from northern states, Northern Virginia and Ohio, and then moved down, met here. And so I was born and raised in this area, although I don't have the southern accent because of my parents. So grew up in Charlotte, went to a church down there. My parents were both raised Catholic and didn't really identify with their faith, but then found a community church down in the Charlotte area. And that's where I grew up in that church and was raised in the Charlotte area. And then, let's see, after that I was homeschooled my whole life all the way through high school, so that was all I knew. The church was a very homeschool-oriented church. There were a lot of homeschool families there. It was a little more odd if you weren't homeschooled than if you were. It's a real tight community, and a lot of big convergence stories where people were falling away from their faith, and they found their faith and came into that community church just because of the community. And I have 6 brothers and sisters, so I'm one of 7, and we are all still relatively in the Charlotte area. One of my brothers moved up north, back to the Virginia area, so still a close family, and all live pretty close together. So that's kind of how I got started in the church. Grew up in the church.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were really active in the church, but that very similar to my story. My father's a pastor, and I grew up, and I was always at church. I mean, that was our whole world, But you grew up with a faith that was very much based in and around your family, So and that's my story as well. So then once you came out and became an adult, you had to start to go through the process of figuring out what that meant for you as adult and what you really believed and what your life looked like and everything. So.
Right. I mean, you hear it every now and again, but it was like, that was kind of like my identity was the church through parents saying, hey, you're going to show up every day, show up to church. So it's just what we did. You just didn't think of it anyways. But then once you start getting to that age, that high school age, where you start doing a little more thinking of your own, why am I doing the things that I'm doing instead of just because my parents told me to. You have to own those things. And kind of starting out, it was just, I just kept going to church because it was what I was supposed to do, and just showing up on Sundays and not really being a part of the family of the church, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool.
Renae?
Yeah.
I grew up in northern Michigan. I moved down here probably about 12 years ago. Very similar to Thomas, grew up in the church entire life. Sunday morning, Sunday evening wasn't an option all the way through. A small farming community, that's really all we did, farm, a little bit of hangout, church. That's honestly about it, nothing special, similar to Thomas as well. Didn't really own my faith. We didn't really do much with the church when it came to serving or missions. Small farming community, that wasn't really the main goal anyways. Not a lot of opportunity when you're over an hour to anywhere anyways to go serve or do anything. So moved down here about 12 years ago and then did the whole church search trying to find something. Came across this church, and then we met at a small group with that church for young adult singles post-college career, and just kind of started hanging out and dating then.
Yeah, and you said your story. This is a theme that came up, and I can really relate to it. Was a theme of growing up and being very, very involved with the church, and that just being a part of your life, and that was what was expected, and that's a good thing, by the way.
Right, right, yeah.
That's a good thing. But then at some point, you do become an adult, and you have to start to answer the question, who am I, and what do I really believe, and what's my lifestyle going to look like now that I'm away from my family, and the watchful eye of mom and dad, and all of that. And so you did end up getting connected in a young adults group. Christian mingle for church, that was like
essentially
before,
what it was.
Before that existed, the singles group, But so you said that you guys met. You told me that you guys met, and then Thomas, you ended up going away for a year, right?
Yeah. So we met. We decided.
We liked each other.
Yeah. So if you haven't noticed, so we started dating, and it was kind of like at the same time when it was like, I really like this girl, but then also went on a missions trip down to Mexico, and there was an orphanage there. Just did it as a week as part of a church, missions trip. Decided to go and did that, and just felt like, hey, they have an opportunity where they need somebody to come full time for the year. They kind of took people in year segments, and said, hey, like, let's go down and serve the orphanage. And they had a school there on site, which outreached to the local community as well, to the kids there. Private Christian school, basically. So there was a good ministry opportunity. So helped in the school there, and then also at the orphanage for a year. So our relationship was rather long distance, as in different countries at that point. Yeah. So that was most of our dating life was long distance like that.
Dated a few months. He left, and then came back like maybe 3 to 4 weeks before the wedding.
Yeah. And they got married.
Yeah. And then we got married. And then 2 months later, got pregnant.
Well, it's kind of the way they did it in, like, when you read in the New Testament about the way weddings worked, they would get engaged, and then the husband would go off to prepare the house, and he'd just be gone, and then one day he would just show up, and they'd get married.
Well, I did the opposite, so I went and decided not to buy a house and spend all of my money on missions.
Yeah, and, just to go to a different,
Yeah, and then come back very unprepared.
Right.
For marriage. But it was good. It was good.
No, it was fun.
All right. Well, good. So you did come back, and you guys got married, and then you told me that you were kind of your next step in your faith was getting involved with a married group, right?
Yeah, so it kind of started as they had like small groups, if you will, community groups, small groups, whatever you want to call them. And there was one where there were a couple young married couples, and then
It's kind of
that just
happened all
kind
in
of,
the same
yeah,
group.
that's just kind of where all the married couples started the head. So we all just kind of ended up in a group there, and it was instead of so much as a study group, it was more of a encouragement and work through things that you kind of run into once you get married, because you go from a single life to a married life. A lot of you know all about that. And so there's...
It turned in kind of like a newly married support group
Yeah,
kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, it
yeah.
really did. We didn't do a whole lot of.
Everybody might need that when they first get married. too,
Yeah,
by the
no,
way,
it was, and it was awesome. It was super great for our marriage, and then things that we didn't go through, we saw other people going through and working through that, so we could kind of work through that before we even ended up in that situation. And out of that, you build that closeness with other people, because you know their stories, you know what they're going through, you can care for them, minister to them, and so it really kind of made a tight bond, and where you actually started to feel that like community, that family with other people inside of the church.
Yeah, so you're starting to experience that.
Yeah.
Right.
Sort of family aspect, the fellowship of church in that way. And that's kind of a newer thing as an adult for you guys, and especially as a couple, to start doing that. And I know that was really impactful on you. But you had moved at some point and were living in Rowan County.
So yeah,
Right?
so that was kind of our first point where we were as a couple. It's kind of built that identity of that we want to own the church. We want to be a part of the church instead of it just being a chore or something that we show up for. Really starting to, through that group, realize what church is intended to be and wanting to be a part of that. And so I ended up getting a job in Salisbury, so we were like, hey, maybe we kind of move out that way a little bit. And Renae, being from a small farm town community in the middle of nowhere, was like, I need more space. Like this
Very
is
eager to get out of.
Yeah, Salisbury was
city.
too big a city for. Yeah,
Charlotte
was too big a city.
Salisbury's
was too
still a
big
little
city.
too big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever we drive back down to my parents' house, I'm like, where are all these cars from? How are there so many people? How did I live in this? But so we decided to slow life down a little bit and moved out this way, but continued to
Driving down into Charlotte for church for about a year,
Yeah.
and that got to be too much.
Yeah. So in that process of driving, which was difficult, that was a lot of time, because then at that point we had our two boys. I don't know if you've met them. They're very shyer than us twin boys. We had them, so it was a lot to try to pack them up, but it ended up working out because we had church, and then our community group that we were in was Sunday afternoon. So we'd go down, have dinner with my parents, and then head over to community group. But then through the church, they kind of made not a cultural shift, but kind of shifted to more taking their small groups and turning them into ministry groups, to outreach groups, to community groups, where they would actually go and minister to their local communities, invite people in, and do things outside of group night, and that just stressed that even more, because we were 45 minutes away, and it was hard to be part of that community that we're starting to feel when it started to move to more of an outreach into the local communities there, which we had a heart for. It was just the distance was too difficult.
It's a good thing that they were doing, but it made it difficult for you guys because you're 45 minutes away, so it's hard for you to come back down on a Tuesday night. It's hard for you.
Right.
You're not inviting your neighbors to church with you because your neighbors are 45 minutes away.
Right.
And you don't have any neighbors because you live a mile off the road on a dirt road that makes you feel like you're not in the right place when you drive down it.
Yeah.
And you're worried that something's going to happen to you and you don't know what's at the end of it, but eventually you do come to your house.
Yeah, when I said we wanted to move out towards space, I think we overcompensated.
Yeah,
and
you
went
really
too far
did.
the other way.
It's just
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I mean, you dinner with your boys, and Sasquatch. That's what happens at your place. But I understand that stress, because when Jess and I we got married, and at that time in our life, I was not interested in being a part of a church. This is where I was. That's another story. But Jess was desperately trying to find a church that we could go to, and my dad was too, all the way from New York, was researching everything he could. And so we were going to a bunch of churches in the area, and nothing. I wasn't happy with anything. And we ended up finding a church in Charlotte. It was 45 minutes away from our house, and I kind of liked it, and I was willing to go there. And so we went for a little while, and then we thought, well, man, if we're going to be here, we really should be more involved. And then we started doing the math. And they had something happening that Sunday night, and we were like, well, yeah, but if we come to church on Sunday morning and it's an hour and a half round trip, and then we come back on Sunday night and that's an hour and a half round trip,
Right.
now we're doing 3 hours of driving, and so it didn't really make sense for us. And it's part of the reason that we decided to plant this church too, because we were living here in Salisbury and I was working in Mooresville, and it was 45 minutes. So it seems to be the magic number, 45 minutes back and forth, and we eventually got to the point where we said, well, we got to make a decision. Is our life here in Mooresville, or is our life here in Salisbury? And God led us to the decision that it was here in Salisbury. But it's a tough thing when you really want to be active and you really want to be involved and have that fellowship and community, and you're just that far away. Mm-hmm. So you guys got to the point where you realized that it just wasn't going to be feasible for you to do all of those things, and that you needed to find something that was closer to home. And then you went to your mailbox.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that you planted the church, so we didn't have to when we wanted a church here. You took the hard part, so we appreciate that. Yeah.
We may or may not have Googled you, make sure you weren't too
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. You went to my social media and there was nothing there.
So being the church that I grew up in, I was it was very hard to leave, just because that was the only church I knew. That's where I grew up. So Renae was a little more not pushy, but suggesting the
encouraging.
Encouraging. That's the word I was going for. Hey, let's check out this church, and she would look into them. So we went and checked out a couple churches, but there was nothing that we had run into that was like, yeah, this one. And the boys notoriously had a hard time transitioning to a new place, let alone away from us in a new place. So it was real hard to go to new churches and check out. So one day I was coming home from work and checking the mail, because we don't make the half-mile walk. We check it when we're driving down. Check the mail, and there was a flyer in there for a new church. So I just jokingly threw it on the counter. I was like, "Found your church for you, babe. Here you go." And I didn't think anything else of it.
And so I looked into it. I'm like, actually, this might be a legit church. So he looked into it a little bit more.
We weren't sure yet either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
But we do joke that the boys technically found the church, because this was the first children's ministry that they went in where they didn't scream and cry bloody murder. So we're like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, now we can't leave.
Yeah. Because they did back at our original church that we were going to.
Every single church we've been to, it's like fetal
man.
position in the corner, crying, like
So,
seeing an hour.
This is great.
Yes.
This is gonna go real well when they get older.
So yes, they actually walked right in. They sat down, and here we are.
Yeah.
So you came, and do you remember what week it was? Was it week 1?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
very
week
first
1.
week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very first week.
Yep.
And I guess so you'd been a part of churches, obviously, in your families growing up. And then as young adults, single and married, you started getting involved in community and relationships in groups, and you started seeing that side of what church was supposed to be for you. The other piece that you really started to see when you came to Carolina Family, you realized that this wasn't a church where you were just going to come and, like, if you wanted to be a part of the church family, you didn't just come and sit in the service and that was it.
Right.
Yeah, it was more than that. So, what'd you do?
Yeah, so, pretty early on, it was like, well, they need help, and we can jump in and serve, and just seeing that, and I think it was, you get that church planning group that's really been through the whole thing together at that point. So they're a close-knit group, and I was like, well, the only way to kind of jump in and become part of that community is to, in the same way we did in our small group before, you just kind of open yourself up, and in this instance, it was to serve, to jump in and start serving. So,
and I think the phrase that you used when we were talking this week was something like, we realized that if you were going to be a part of the family here, you served. So that's what we would do.
Yeah.
So that's what you decided to do, and you told me that you were a little nervous about that. And obviously you got over that because you serve in a bunch of different capacities now in the church, multiple places, and you guys are so consistent. And so what did it take to get you over, to make that leap and to do that? Or what were the hurdles to it,
I mean, you just have to do something. You just need to do it. Like, you just, I don't know, just do it. That's kind of, I guess, was our motto. I don't know, like.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you've learned about serving?
Yeah, so, showing up, like, and it's probably just like my interpretation of what I saw as a kid growing up in the church. You see a lot of the highlighted people, who are also the ones that serve the church, are the people that have these stories that are either elaborate conversion stories, or they went through a certain thing, so now they can help through a certain way. And just seeing like, oh, I'm just an ordinary kid that grew up in the church. I don't have a special story. I don't have like this gift that I feel that I can minister to other people. So jumping in and like going to serve, they're like, yeah, we really need help in children's ministry. I was like, well, that's the last place I would sign up. I was like, I mean, I got two little kids of my own that I'm like, you get to that point where you realize like, I have no idea what I'm doing parenting, and now you want me to minister to like other people's
You get to that
kids.
point, or it's always like that?
Always at that point.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, okay, I'll give you that one. So it's I mean, just felt inadequate. Like, I don't have anything special. I don't have any like story or history. I'm just who I am. And it was like looking back to like in the Bible, like Jesus' 12 disciples, like he just walked up to them. They were fishermen. He said, hey, come follow me. Come serve with me. They didn't know what they're doing. They didn't have any qualifications. They weren't some religious leaders to any extent. They were just the people that were willing to go, were willing to serve. So they're like, you know what? Let's just jump in and do it, and God will use us, or not, but we hope He does. So that was the initial plunge was into children's ministry, which I didn't feel qualified for at all. But
You never got kicked out, so I think you did okay.
yeah. So and Renae jumped in there as well, jumping in the nursery. But it was let's show up for setup, show up. Stay for teardown. So
Yeah, and now you've done setup team. You've done you've done Carolina Kids, both of you. Tom, you're part of setup team. Renae, you're doing coffee, and helping to organize and help that happen. Thomas, you're doing lights and bringing up the house lights, and all that kind of stuff, and doing multiple. And you're kind of cross trained up there too, and you guys are doing multiple things. And I do think that idea of feeling underqualified is a strong one for a lot of people, and maybe for some of you too, not feeling like you have something to offer or to give. You were talking about people with dramatic testimonies, and feeling like those were the people who had the thing, like they had something to use in order to serve. In fact, this week when we were talking, I can't remember which one of you used the term qualifying event. Didn't feel like you had a qualifying event in your life that set you up to serve.
right.
And I've told this story many times, but I've always felt that too. In fact, when we sat down the other night to talk, I said, all right, now just tell me your story. Like, I already know your story, but just tell me your story, just kind of the Cliff Notes version. And they were like, well, it's pretty boring. Like, well, boring is good. Boring is good. Boring is the testimonies. Boring testimonies, in a way, are testimonies of faithfulness, and because faithfulness often isn't dramatic. It's consistency, day in and day out, doing the things that God wants you to do, and that doesn't make headlines. Mm-hmm. And so, I kind of felt I had that growing up too. And once I was complaining about that to my youth pastor in high school, who had a dramatic testimony, huge conversion story, and I was always in awe of his testimony, and I wanted a testimony like his. And he just like chastised me directly. He said, "Don't you dare ever say that." He said, "I would kill to have a testimony like yours." And I was like, "Well, don't do that." But, so we need to value the story that we have. And you have just, to me, it's like slowly stepping. And you've just taken steps along the way. And one of those was to get over that feeling of being unqualified and just say, I just want to get in here. I honestly, I struggle with that myself too, as a pastor, because I often feel very unqualified to do what I do. And in private moments where you just, you think about the responsibility that you have or whatever, and you just feel totally crushed by the weight of that, not feeling like you can do what you're supposed to do and be who you're supposed to be, and that can keep you from doing what you're supposed to do and being who you're supposed to be. And in particular for me, people always come up to me as a pastor, and typically I try to wait as long as I can for people to find out I'm a pastor. I don't want them to find out right away, because people, it's like a butterfly. It's a metamorphosis that happens in front of your eyes when somebody finds out that you're a pastor. You're just talking to them, and they're totally normal, and and then they find out you're a pastor, and they like shape-shift right in front of you into this perfect little altar boy or whatever, So it's like, I don't want people to do that. But when people do eventually find out that I'm a pastor, though, their first question, church people, the first question church people usually ask is, oh, where did you go to seminary? Well, I didn't go to seminary, and then I feel like I have to give this long list of qualifications to prove to them that I am adequate to fulfill the role that I'm in. And that's something I'm trying to get over, but it's hard because, when you look at other people and they have what you think are the qualifications and you don't have that, it's easy to not take steps forward or be insecure or whatever. Yeah. And so at some point you just got to get over that and realize that God will prepare you to do whatever it is he wants you to do. And if he leads you to do it, then he's going to take care of all of that. And so it's great. I'm glad you were willing to do that. So you realized that you were not underqualified to do it, but that you just had to do it. What was the next thing that you realized? And it goes right along with that.
Just being willing to do it. Just like Renae said earlier, just jump in and do it. That was kind of half the reason, I guess, going back to serving at the orphanage in Mexico. I had previously, I don't know if anybody's read the book by Kevin DeYoung, Just Do Something, but it was, it kind of led you that way. Was just sometimes you just got to jump out and do something. So did that, and it went well. So it's, let's just jump in and do the same thing at church and see what happens. And it's leaving your qualification to what Jesus wants to do through you in your life than it is so much what I'm capable of. And really leaving that to him and just trusting in him that, if you're going to step out and serve, he's going to give you whatever you need to make that happen.
I was thinking that, often we don't do things because we don't feel qualified. But if God has called us to do something, if he's leading us to do something, then he either has already qualified us to do that, or he will qualify us to do it as we're doing it. He thinks that we can do it. He wouldn't lead us to do it if he didn't already think that. And so, one of the things that you mentioned to me as we were talking is that, we talk about calling, and oftentimes people think they're waiting on a call from God. They're waiting on God. They're waiting for a burning bush, or for a pillar of clouds, or for a shooting star, or for some sort of big sign. And sometimes God will do things like that, but it's very, very rare in my experience. But in that, you just realize that God has called everybody to serve in one way or another. And so you just have to be willing to actually step out and do that.
I mean, I guess I kind of think of it too, like, relationships are two-way streets. Like, you can't always just be getting and getting. Like, you also have to give. You have to work at it. It goes both ways. People say that too with like prayer. Like, you have to be praying. You have to be reading your Bible if you want to hear from God, if you want to be into it. But serving is the same way. Church is the same way. Like, you have to serve the church. You can't just expect the church to constantly be serving you and doing everything for you. You're not going to get anything from the church if you're not also giving yourself and your time to the church as well.
Yeah, I think if you even think about your earthly family, like if you have members of your earthly family that are just always trying to, take, and, they're never contributing to the family, they're never putting back into it, that doesn't really feel like family.
Right. Family
is when we're all contributing together, and when we're serving each other and putting each other first, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good thing to show up to church. Not trying to discredit that, and to show up and find out what it is. But then that's where we were before we got married and before we found the community group. We were just showing up, and we know what that's like, and it's good because you get taught. But you don't have those relationships. You don't have that family feeling until you put yourself out there to be part of that family. And even if you don't feel qualified, you just have to be willing. And that's when I guess as somebody that's somewhat introverted, it makes it easy for me now that I'm serving to start building those relationships inside of the serving teams. It's hard to walk up and, so how are you? For me, it's hard to just start a conversation, whereas, hey, here, come, let me show you this. This is how you take this down. Let's go set this up, or let's do this. And it's easier to start building those relationships through the time serving itself as well. But I also think that Jesus specifically designed the church, his church, to be a place where we communally serve because he knew that's what built relationships with each other, but it also puts you in a place that you can build a relationship with him. So we've really come to discover that and find that in the past couple years jumping in and serving.
Yeah. You mentioned the example of the disciples earlier, in the feeling underqualified. Jesus went to fishermen and tax collectors and said, come follow me. And the second piece of that, he obviously wanted them to serve. He obviously knew that they were qualified to do it, or that he would qualify them in the process. He was going to spend 3 years with them,
right? And
they were going to be ready after that time, And so he drew them in. But the second piece of that is their willingness, that they said yes. And they went and they followed him, which is incredible.
Yeah, I'll think about it. They dropped their nets.
Right.
Left their boats.
Right. Yeah, can you imagine Peter was like, Jesus, let me pray about that.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't, Jess talks about this all the time. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this on her behalf, because a lot of you serve in this church because Jess asked you to, and then she didn't stop asking you to. All right? She's a bird dog, so she'll get after it. She all the time will come home and she'd be like, I asked so-and-so to hand out programs at the door. And they said, let me pray about it. She was like, what do you need to pray about? It's not that hard. It's not difficult. You don't need a degree, You just say yes. That's it. You just do it, You want a calling, you just got it. I just asked you, So, the willingness of being willing, yep, I'll do that, And Jesus went to those disciples and he called them and they said yes. And of course, he knew they were going to say yes too, but, they were willing to do it, which is incredible. And then once you're willing to do that and you're willing to jump in, what you end up experiencing in the church is a whole different level than what you experience when you are observing. That's the way I would put it, versus contributing. So, talk with us a little bit about that. What has that meant for you once you made the decision to start serving? How's that changed the way you experience church and what it is?
Well, first, I think Jess does ask a lot of people to serve. I think the church does have just a heart-to-heart with the members. No, you can stay up there.
There's room.
Yeah. There are needs in the church, but as we've been here over the past couple of years, John and Jess and the other team leaders, it's not that they just want help. It's not that they just have a need and they need something done. They also understand and know what this means, where they want you to be part of the church family because they know what that means relationally. They know what that means for your spiritual growth. They know what that will in turn have an effect in the community outside of church in Salisbury. So it starts with them asking, but really the reason they're asking, what we've discovered is that's for you. That's not just for the church. And just seeing that, even in trying to parent our kids and just showing them as an example of what it means to serve the church, and having those conversations with them and explaining, because they're going to grow up the same way we did in the church, and start showing them that they can have their identity in the church as well, and what that means by being part of the community, and really trying to live that out for them and explain that and bring that to them so that they can understand that as well.
Yeah, that's a point that's really, it's important to me personally, because it's a process that I've worked through just as a leader in a church, of why we talk about serving and why we have these opportunities and why we create opportunities for people to do this. Because I have confession time. I'll confess, I'm on the couch. We'll do counseling. I'm on the couch. I'm on the chair. But, in ministry in the past, in other churches that I've been a part of, I won't speak for anyone else. I'll just speak for myself. But in churches in the past, my mentality was, and I might not have said this, but it truly was, that I wanted people to serve, because the more people that were serving, the larger our ministries grew. The larger the ministries grew, the larger the church grew. The more the budget grew, the more it was an organizational motivation for getting people involved in ministry. And I have personally come to the point where I really dislike that idea. and I don't want to embody that, lead to that, teach to that, anything like that anymore. Because what I've learned is that my involvement in ministry is not just to build an organization. My involvement in ministry is to honor God with my life and to grow closer with Him, and then to grow closer in fellowship with the church as I serve the church. And so it's not about the organization. It's about my spiritual growth and development and maturity. And so from a position where we're designing ministries and trying to encourage people to get into ministries, and even what we're doing today, that the goal for this is not to build Carolina Family Church, the organization, to increase numbers or capacity or anything like that, or budgets or anything like that. It is because serving is the model of Jesus, and so serving is the best thing for you.
Right.
It's the best thing for you to do. And so your church is where you do that primarily, because that's your family, that's the spiritual body God has put you as a part of. But we're supposed to be serving as an attitude with our entire life. So that means, what we do here during a service or whatever it may be, or in a community event or other things, outreach, is the tip of the iceberg. And then what that heart, that desire to serve and to love and to care for, is supposed to flow over out into everything in our life. So it flows out into your job, and it flows out into your blood family, and it flows out into the community as a whole. And so, it's putting on a different frame of mind with our life. And this is an opportunity here to start here and to really let that develop and to grow. And so it's really important that we're all considering that. And I want to challenge all of you today to consider that. How are you serving, and how are you contributing, and how are you being a part of the family? Because I look at you guys and just see the where God has brought you from, and you've done things that you've been uncomfortable with, very uncomfortable with. I know. Thomas, you leading men's group, and boy, you didn't want to do that, but you said yes. You said yes, and you didn't want to do it. I knew it, but you said yes. And so there's been a process of learning and growing, and to see that in you guys has been a real blessing to our church. And so I want to thank you for that, and we love you guys, and we need you here every single week, because when you're not here, we feel it. Even like there are weeks where I'm like, what's going on? Oh, yeah, they're not here. You're camping. So, but you can go camping. It's fine. But I just want to express to you how much you mean to our church family, how thankful we are for you, what you've meant to us. And if any of you want to get involved in anything here in the church, your first stop is going to be Jess, and she's going to, or Judy at Resource. And Jess will come up here and talk in a minute. But I know Thomas and Renae, if you're nervous about getting in and you have questions, they've served pretty much everywhere at this point, except the band. You guys haven't done
nobody wants that to happen.
You haven't done that yet, but that's the only place you haven't served. But you serve pretty much everywhere else. Yeah. So if anybody is a little, has some trepidation about that or questions or whatever, then they can come up and talk to you. You guys are going to hang out right here afterward, and they can talk to you about that a little bit. Appreciate you guys. We love you.
Thank you.
We're thankful for you. And hopefully what you've talked about today will encourage others to take the same steps that you've been able to take and are continuing to take. So let's thank Thomas and Renae for sharing with us today. All right, well, let's close with a word of prayer. And we'll say a word of prayer, a blessing, encouragement. Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to gather together and allowing us to be a church family, to serve each other, to love each other, all because we know that though we were once strangers to one another, we've been brought together by the blood of Jesus, his life given on the cross for us. And so we thank you so much for that sacrifice. Lord, we thank you for the power that we saw displayed in the resurrection of Jesus on the third day. And we know that you have conquered sin and death and that when you say that you can forgive us, if we put our faith in Jesus Christ for salvation, by your grace, you will forgive us. You say that, and we know that's true. And so we thank you for that. I pray if there's anyone here who's never made that decision today, that they would believe in you for salvation today for the first time. And for all of us that have made that decision, as we continue to walk on this journey and learn what it means to follow Jesus and to follow his model, I pray, God, that you would teach us every day how to be closer with you, how to learn more and more about you, and to live in the freedom that you give to us, to understand you and our relationship with you, but also to understand our relationship with each other and what that looks like, how to live in community with each other and support each other and care for each other, to teach each other, to encourage one another, and the ways that you allow that to do us just within this church family, this body that we have, but the opportunities that you give us every single day. So we just ask, God, right now that you would lead us individually and show us what steps you want us to take. We'll take them faithfully, and we want you to know, as a result, we want you to receive as much honor and glory, all the honor and glory that you deserve through our life and the relationships that we have with each other. We thank you for it. Today specifically, we thank you for Thomas and Renae, for what they mean to our church, for their children, for their family, and all that you have planned for them, all that you've done with them, and all that you will do with them in the future. We thank you, and we ask that you continue to bless them as you continue to bless our entire church. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.